I died twice. As a child, this is my story. I know this is the internet, and people tend to lie, but please believe me when I share these stories. The first time, I was 3 or 4. I was at my grandparents' house on a Sunday morning, and while my family was getting ready for church, I was busy getting into trouble. I found a key on a marble table my grandparents had in their hallway, and I had the fun idea to stick it in a socket just below the table. I was a strong-willed, naughty child, and often did the exact opposite of what I was told, so of course, I had to see what fun I was missing out on. It was the first time I recall ever hearing my internal voice, or whatever you know to call it. When I stuck the key into the socket with my right hand, I began to seize with the charge of electricity going through my body. I specifically remember a voice inside my head saying, "This is what dying feels like." I flew back and hit my head on the marble floor. My grandparents were Italian. Everything was marble. And then I began my ascent. I remember traveling out through the dining room window and heading up. Not straight up, but forward and up. I did not recognize any of the vague faces that lined the channel of light I was traveling up. But again, as a child, I did not know anyone who had died at this time, so there were no familiar faces, but the presence of entities nonetheless. Their presence was warm and welcoming, and felt as if they passed through me, like 2 different smoke trails intermingling. I was weightless and unafraid. Another way to describe the feeling was as if there was a mist surrounding me. There was some sort of field I was shifting through that I had never experienced in my human body. The light that most people recall was there. At the highest point, I encountered the presence of something known, something authoritative. A voice without words told me I was not ready yet. I had to go back, and I was given my mission. For personal reasons, I would like to keep that to myself. But if this piques the interest of true believers, I may share. I can say that was a simple message, one that my heart and mind understood, even for a child, which I did not feel like a child when outside of my body. Upon receiving my commission, I was no longer in the presence of the light. I was turned away and began to descend. This is where things changed. I have not researched other people's NDEs to preserve the uniqueness of my own experience, so I cannot speak to whether this next part is common or not, but it has stuck to me, viscerally, to this day. Immediately, all the warmth and comfort I felt in the light began to fade. Fast. Every weight that had been lifted or lightened as I went up began to surround me on my way back down towards my body. Peace was replaced with fear. I worried and wondered how I could find my body. I was a little girl. How could I get back to my grandparents' house in Montreal, a big city that I did not know? I had not even crossed the street by myself at that point. I saw with the consciousness's sight available to me, the whole city below. This occurred in the early 80s, and I had never seen an image similar to Google Earth View, but that is exactly what it looked like to me. I zoomed in closer and closer. I was not in control of where I was going, but clearly my spirit knew how and where to find my earthly body. I cannot reiterate enough how much weight I felt returning. It was as if the home was being ripped away from me, and all the trappings that even my young body felt had been reapplied with each and every meter I came closer to rejoining myself. Some details are foggy. I remember my older sister kicking me while I was on the ground, thinking I was faking it. It was the first physical sensation I recall feeling. When I awoke in my physical body, I went to see my dad in the room. He was getting ready in and said, "Daddy, Daddy, I saw Jesus." For a 3 or 4-year-old, that was all I knew. So that's how I explained it. I remember my dad taking both my hands and looking for marks. There were none. Let me answer a few questions for any skeptics out there. My grandparents had an old house with old wiring. There was nothing to cause a breaker to trip. So the current, I don't know the voltage, went through me until I blasted back and onto the ground. It was the 80s, and there was nowhere to take me after the incident. So I have no medical proof of this, just my memories. Also, because it was the 80s, parents parented a little more relaxed. There was no fuss made about the incident, though my older sister did get in trouble for kicking me. Another thing to note is that this must have been a traumatic experience for me as a child. And like many experiences that are too big for a young mind to handle, it was stored away deep in my mind until it surfaced when I was prepared to handle the repercussions. I was well into my 20s before the memories fully reassembled in my mind. At that time, I went to my dad and asked if he remembered. His memory was jogged to the event I described, and knowing now how big of a moment it was, we are dumbfounded that it was swept over so easily in our family history. That was event number 1. The second event occurred when I was 11. I was playing with a boy, trying to keep up and show how tough I was. We were getting up to no good, unattended. It was the 80s, remember? Kids came home when the streetlights came on. In our ever-increasing moments of daring activities, trying cigarettes for the first time happened that day as well. We decided we would play a choking game. I choked him first, and he tapped out. I refused to be a sissy like him, and never tapped out. The situation was nearly the exact same as the first time. Although I did not consciously remember my first NDE at the time I experienced my second one, everything that happened outside my body was the same. It felt doubly familiar. The fact that it had happened years earlier only made the scenario feel more commonplace. Doesn't everybody have this happen to them? The same sensation of going forward and up, being lifted, becoming ever lighter and more free from the white noise and anxiety that permeate our earthly existence, greeted me again. Again, I did not recognize a single soul that lined my effervescent channel upward, but their presence was comforting as they greeted me on my journey toward home. Once more, I was in the presence of light. No sandaled giant sitting upon a throne, just light and love. Total peace. I was again told my mission and redirected back to my earthly body. The same feeling of the weight returning was upon me. The same fear of finding my body. The mental chatter we all experience grew louder the closer I got. When I awoke, there was a feeling of cold wetness on my face. The boy who had strangled me was weeping over me. His tears had soaked my face. He was angry, thinking it was a terrible prank that I had played. But I had gone gray, and there was blood that had come out of my right ear. He knew I was dead. But then I came back. We did not tell a single soul, for fear we would get in trouble for our antics of smoking and running amok in the forest like wild things. We thought for sure we would catch a whooping for our stupidity, so we swore to never speak of it again. I do not know if I have suffered any remaining damage as a result of these two experiences. Those who know me might say there is something a little off about me, but nothing that became an impediment to me living a normal life. I will say that whether it is as a result of the NDEs or not, I do have a heightened sense of the unexplained. I have no fear whatsoever of death. Quite the opposite. I long for that feeling of freedom and of being home. Currently, I am a nurse and want to work with those who are dying. Palliative care is the field I'm drawn to help people transition with ease and less fear towards what awaits. It has taken a long time to get here, but I believe that part of the reason I was sent back was to fulfill this dream and help others untangle the mysteries of the afterlife. I can only speak to my experience. I'm not looking for a debate, nor do I want to have to defend two of the most defining moments of my life. Simply wanted to share for the first time what it was like for me to die twice. TLDR, died twice. The first time I was electrocuted at 3 or 4, and the second time I was strangled at 11. The 80s were a crazy time.